Currency. I'd say an honor because David is one of 2 or 3 people in the country able to give this talk in an authoritative manner. So we're hearing it from someone who knows about there. Okay, so David.
The learning process. She's going to start actually, so Pam's going to do a little bit of the history, and then I'll get into the actual fractional currency. So you're on your own.
No pictures of me, Penny.
No.
That's why I put the slides up. He can take the slides.
Yeah.
So coins and paper items are considered by a lot of us as history in your hands. The kids have heard me say this many times. Yep. Fractional currency fits right in there because it covers the Civil War era, the start of the Bureau of Engraving and Printing, and there's lots of scandals and great history. Now, we won't have time tonight for him to go into everything. When he does it at A&A, it's a 9-hour course.
Yeah. For those of you who know, this is a 9-hour course.
Yeah. So we're just doing 3. So let's go back to just before the Civil War. Tensions were high, and the people felt very insecure. With the government edicts against the coinage, they trusted gold, silver, and copper, and these soon were begun to be hoarded. So they were almost non-existent. Some people sold coins to Canada for more than their face value. There was no way to make change. Just think about it. You went into a store, you bought something. In those days, a nickel was an amount of money. I mean, it was, so if you used a larger piece of money, if you had $1 and nobody would have change, so you wouldn't buy it. If you took one of the horse-drawn streetcars, you couldn't get on. You had to have a nickel, so you couldn't get on. So there was a real crisis. Bread, you couldn't go buy a loaf of bread. Everyday commerce almost stopped, and people were unable to obtain items for their day-to-day existence. So a bunch of things happened. Jim showed you the rubber or vulcanized tokens, but there was all kinds of script that was all kinds of script that municipalities, but mostly people in business, would give it, the merchants would give it out as change. Of course, they had to bring it back there to use it. It wasn't something you could use your change at another store. But it was a way of enabling people to get things. So here are some examples of that. Made it easier to make change, but you could only, again, because it was only in that one area, it wasn't something you could go to another town or another store and use. So the government stepped in with another fix. People trusted the value of stamps. So stamps were made legal to use as money. The problem was that the government never told the post office what was coming, and there was a run on the stamps. There was a rush to get the stamps, and they soon ran out of the lower denomination stamps. Stamps was really not a good answer to the problem. They stuck together. They didn't hold up with frequent use. And because the post office was still very mad at them doing this to them, they really messed up. They said, okay, if anybody wants to redeem them here at the post office, they have to make a list individually of all of the stamps, and then we will give you, and it has to be, how much was it? It had to be $5 worth. They wouldn't take either $5 or $7 worth before they could redeem them. You know how many 3-cent stamps that would be? And they would all stick together, so it was a real pain. But that's what they had to do. All right. The next try was to have envelopes marked with the value of the stamps inside.
Yeah, you did that for us.
Yeah. Okay. And these are the envelopes. Some of them were plainer than this, but, well, that one's pretty plain, but a lot of the advertising ones are really, really neat and hard to get.
These are
Sometimes,
very collectible, by the way,
Yeah.
if you're into that
if you
kind
ever
of thing.
see them. So this worked sort of, except you had to start carrying whole bunches of little envelopes with you, which is a little problem. And then some people cheated. They cut out little tiny squares of colored paper, put them in the envelopes. Oh yeah, there's a stamp in there. And then there wasn't, if anybody ever looked. So that was a problem. The next try was Galt's invention of a small brass holder about this big with a stamp visible under isinglass. You know what that is? Mica. Sheets of mica. Yeah. And they would have that in there, and you could see the stamp, so you would know that that's what it was. And you could carry those in your pocket a little bit easier. He was able to sell these originally without advertising, and then he started selling them with the advertising. And they were very popular because they would last for a long time, and the Ayers pills is one of the big ones. It's most popular. But they didn't last long because...
Just let me interrupt for a second. If you ever are an eBay person, look at eBay for these things. They're going for enormous prices.
Yeah, but you have to watch out because sometimes they'll take out the existing stamp and put in an old one they find in a collection of a higher denomination because they're worth a lot more. So you have to make sure it's the original stamp. You can tell how it's done, but that's the important thing. The government finally found a solution. The U.S. Treasurer, Francis Elias Spinner, was aware that stamps were trusted. And he made a prototype by pasting stamps on a piece of paper, putting lines around it, and an amount, and this is called postage currency. This is the letter that he wrote, where he did the prototype for it, and he sent this later to a friend in California. And he wrote a note on it that said, thought you might be interested in this. It's not worth anything, but you might be interested in this is when I made the prototype for the postage currency. Well, I saw that at the Smithsonian, and I just freaked out. I mean, held it in my hand.
That original's in the Smithsonian.
Yeah, in the vault there. And we held it in our hands. It was amazing. So postage currency, this was called, and it was born. And the first ones were even made, the notes were actually made with perforations, just like a stamp. But after they made a few, it didn't work out because they'd stick in the machine and break up, and it wasn't any good. So they made the plain edge, as the presses couldn't handle that. Yeah,
That's your chance to talk about the women.
Oh, okay.
That's why they put women in the...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
There was a man named Mr. Clark who had a job, and he was in charge of taking care of the notes. Now, in the early days, banknote companies made the notes and sent the sheets of the two banknote companies made the front and the back. They didn't have anybody make both. So what happened was they would send these sheets to the Bureau of it was the Bureau of Monetary Bureau. Anyway, Clark would have people cut with scissors all the notes, which is why these early notes had uneven edges, margins. And so he hired women to do this. These were the first women hired by the U.S. government. You'll hear more about Mr. Clark.
Yeah, you will. So anyhow, there's 5 issues of fractional currency. It started in 1862. And the first issue went to just about a year, not quite a year. There were $20 million worth issued, and you can see that it's up there. There are 4 basic notes in the first issue. There's one for each denomination, 5, 10, 25, 50. There are 17 varieties in this issue, and all have facsimiles of 5 and 10 cent postage stamps. That's why they were called postage currency. These had no legal tender. There was no promise by the government to pay. These were purely pieces of paper that people could use to circulate with no promised redemption. There were no signatures on them, and they were redeemable at the post office in exchange for United States notes, but there was no guarantee that they could be turned in. There was no promise on them that they would be redeemed. Say, picture of the perforated and the unperforated variety. As you said, they started with perforated, had trouble separating them, and that's when they went to women to cut them apart. They printed them with no perforations, and then had people hired to cut them apart. There were, I'll show you in a second, there's ones with the American banknote monogram on the back, and there's some without the American banknote company because they were being printed by both the National Banknote Company and the American Banknote Company. They were printed in sheets of 20. The 5 cent is brown. If you look, the backs of them, by the way, these are all my notes. Carl was talking about, can you get really clean notes? You really have to look to find truly uncirculated, crisp notes anymore. They're just about going off the market unless you buy somebody's collection. But if you keep looking, it's like my Wharton note. You keep looking, you can find them. They're out there. There's the 2 different varieties. The National Banknote Company variety is on the left. The American Banknote Company is on the right. The 10 cent note, Washington, again, the 10 cent stamp. Printed with perforated and unperforated again with ABC or non-ABC on the back. These were green. They had the same back as you saw before with that black portrait. The 25 cent note, Jefferson. There are 4 varieties of this. Again, printed both with perforated and straight. I'm not sure why I didn't put a straight one up there. Printed with and without ABC again. And these were printed in sheets of 16. By the way, sheets are highly collectible and pretty difficult to find. There's one on eBay of this actual note right now for $4,500. So they're not easy to find. Brown face, buff, yellowish paper, with, again, that same black back that the others had. 50 cent note, Washington, again, 5 10 cent stamps is the image across the front. Both perforated and unperforated. The one thing I will say, as you see up here, 14 and 12 perforated. This is a controversy that's still going on in the field of fractional currency. There is a 14 per inch perforation note, and there is a 12 perforation inch perforated note. There is some question about whether the 14 was created as a counterfeit from a cut note. In other words, one without perforations at all, and whether somebody actually made the perforations to get an extra money out of obviously the collector market. But nobody's been able to prove that one way or the other. They're printed again in sheets of 16. The back is the same as the other ones with the black back. The second issue followed immediately in 1863. Lasted for about a year, $23 million, and that's a lot of money back then, by the way. $23 million was a lot of money. 4 basic types of notes there, 5, 10, 25, and 50 cent. There are 19 varieties of these notes, and here they made it legal currency. They did away with the stamp picture, and they determined that this and all future fractional currency would be legal tender, and they came back and made the postage currency legal tender. So at that point, you could then redeem both the postage currency and all future issues through the government. There's a common denominator or a common design on this. It's Washington's portrait. All the backs are similar with different colors. This one is where counterfeiting really started to take place. And this issue is counterfeited immensely. And so you have to, if there are people who go out there and collect the counterfeit. I'll show you at the bottom to try to make it hard to counterfeit. If you look here, they put this bronze circle. This is, the note was printed, and then they put a bronze powder on the note and heated it. And it made that bronze circle there. And they also created, if you could blow this up, I should have blown it up probably. This note, this scene right here is a port scene of New York port. And it's extremely detailed. If you blow that up, the graphics in that portrait are extremely detailed, with little lines and little signatures and little things all through it. And that's what they were trying to do to prevent counterfeiters, was to create something very difficult. The other thing they did to prevent counterfeiting was they started to change the paper. And they used different papers. They also used different inks just to try to see what they could do to prevent counterfeiting. So there's lots of varieties in this second issue, and it is, as I said, it was only out there for a year. There's the picture of it. That's Washington Easy. You can see it up there with the nice bronze circle. This is the first issue where they started to mark on the notes when it was made and the type of paper that was used, or ink. You can get these little surcharges on all four corners. And they down here is the date, and the two top ones were ink, the different types of ink they were using, and or different types of paper that they were using. And so you can get all those varieties out there. They're all out there to be collected if anybody gets in it. Here you see one in the left-hand corner up here. There are a lot of varieties of this stuff. That's the 50-cent note. You see the red back? That one has all four surcharges on it on the right over there. And again, you might even be able to see the port scene a little clearer in this picture than you could in the one before. You can see what they were trying to do with the engraving. The end of 1864, Clark, who's secretary, wrote this to Congress saying, look, you know, there is so much counterfeiting going on that we have just got to continually change these notes, because otherwise we're going to be flooded with counterfeits. It gives them too much time to replicate the note, so we'll change frequently and just change the whole design every 6 to 9 months is really what basically he was advocating at the time. And then take the other ones out of circulation. It's one of the reasons why, it doesn't say that in the collectors, but I'm 99% sure it's one of the reasons why they made this legal tender at this issue, was so that they could redeem them instead of letting them out there floating around, and people would turn them in. Third issue, in 64, and it went for quite a while, except that it's different. You'll see there's different designs and pieces of currency in that time frame. The 3 cent and 15 cent denomination, this is the only issue that has the 3 cent. The 3 cent is the only piece of paper currency that the U.S. government has ever made in a 3 cent denomination, and it's the smallest note that the U.S. government has ever made in paper currency. And it was only done once. This is it. There are different 50-cent notes. And again, it was because of the counterfeiting. 73 varieties in that time period were made. Each one has a different person, different vignette. And this is the first issue that has signatures on the notes themselves. I'm going too fast, yell, because I don't want to run too late here tonight. There's the 3-cent note. Attractive note, by the way. Washington in the middle. There's a light and a dark background. This background here on some of them is very light colored, and on others is darker colored. The darker is the more collectible or the more valuable background, but you can get it both ways. But down at the bottom, you see at the end of this period, this was replaced with a 3-cent nickel. It was the first coin that replaced fractional currency was a 3-cent nickel. There's the 5-cent. That's Mr. Clark. He's famous. He's famous because on this note that was printed here, he printed his own signature or his own portrait on the note. Now Congress, at least the story is, Congress said they wanted a picture of Lewis and Clark on the note. He put his picture on the note, and as a result of this note, you can no longer have living individuals on any currency. The portrait of living individuals on any currency. They passed a law right after this note was printed, making it illegal to have, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute when we get to the and there's a lot of history in this. I don't have time to go into it, but there's a lot of history in this area that it's fun to do. This note, very easily collectible. This note, you'll find if you're out collecting, there's an awful lot of red smearing on this ink. I don't know why, but almost, I would say 90% of the notes with the red back on them have an ink smear across the back. This one is the first, oh, by the way, this is the first note where they actually began to put currency indicators where it was on the sheet. In other words, they indicated what position on a sheet of, this one I think is 16, wasn't it? 20. This was 20 notes, and the indicator would tell you where on those 20 notes that note was in the printing. And so this was the first time that the Bureau had ever used position indicators on sheets of note like this.
Give him a little credit now, since he's the one that thought of doing all this.
Oh yeah, well, he was the background of all this. I mean, there's no question Clark was the brainchild of all this.
He even had them
just got himself in trouble when he put his portrait on it.
Yeah.
And this one is the second one that was replaced with a coin. The 5-cent nickel came out and replaced this note over time. There's the 10-cent issue. And again, you can see the position indicator. The left-hand notes on the sheet all have a 1 on them. Oh yeah, this is cents appear nowhere on the note. It's the same thing if you remember, there's a story with the coins as well. With the 5-cent, no cents, 5 cent. Well, they had the same issue with this one. This one supposedly at least passes $10 somewhere, but I'm not so sure how true that is either. But again, but this one has the autograph signatures. You can see Spinner's signature and Colby's signature on it.
Point out, Spinner's signature is very famous.
Yeah, this signature right here, Francis Spinner, it sells for big money in his autograph. You can buy copies of his things that he made and things that he signed, and it's a very collectible autograph, not just on fractional currency, but on all kinds of government documents. I have a slide on how his signature evolved from the 1850s to the end of his career or his life. And you can buy posters with his signature by year through his whole life. Portrait of Fessenden. He was Treasury Secretary. This is the first time they began to use bronzing in the design itself. So if you remember back with the Washington, you had the big bronze circle. Now they're using bronze designs. Same technique, they're bronze powder and baked into it. But again, first time they've used it in this issue. They changed the colors of the backs, again, to stop counterfeiting. Here's the 50-cent issue. And this is where counterfeiting became big time because they were counterfeiting the bigger notes. And so this was the first, and that is Francis Spinner. The portrait is Spinner himself. And this is, as I said, the first of number of issues in this third issue, number of notes, 50-cent notes in the third issue. They had a lot of different designs, inks, paper combinations, and signature combinations, by the way, on these notes. Again, position indicators. The top 3 notes on a sheet have an A. The 4 left notes have a 1. So when you're collecting these, you obviously have the opportunity of getting in whatever varieties you want to get into and whatever depth of detail you want to get into. The second 50-cent note, you can see the back was changed. It's a different back completely. Again, using bronzing on both the front and the back. And again, position indicators on almost half the notes. The next issue of it, you can see there's no portrait. And that was a result of Clark's putting his portrait on. This is the first time that Congress got involved with this and said, we're not going to put portraits on this till we resolve the issue. And so they went to designs rather than portraits on these later issues of fractional currency because they passed this law, no living person, and then there were lots of arguments about who was going to be on, who wasn't going to be on, as we get today. But this is the first one with an actual image on it, a design image. There are 32 different varieties of this note, as you can see. And again, you have to look at all the surcharges, but ink and paper, position indicators, printed and autographed signatures. Oh yeah, that's something I didn't mention going through. Almost all the varieties have both combinations of printed signatures, which were done by machine, and hand-signed signatures. And I've never known, I don't think anybody knows why or who did what to decide which ones got signed and which ones didn't get signed, but there are both varieties out there. You can buy them, you can get them with both printed and autographed signatures. Again, position indicators on half the notes, give or take. This is the note that was designed and ready to be issued when Clark put his picture on the note instead of Lewis and Clark. And this is the note that never got issued. You can only find this note in specimen because it was ready to be issued. The samples and specimens had been issued. The plates had all been made. And then they passed a law on no living people. So this note is available in a sample variety, but it is not available as an actual note anywhere. You'll see it on the currency shield. You can look right here in the middle. There's that note. They had already printed these shields up. These shields were printed and made to give to banks so that banks could look at an actual note And these are all specimen notes, by the way. They're all one-sided. Everything on a fractional shield is a specimen note. But the banks were all given copies of these shields so they could determine counterfeits from real. And this was their basic way to look at a note that came into their bank and determine whether it was a counterfeit or not. They could compare it to these. But as I said, these shields had already been made up, and these notes had already been put on the shields before they decided not to issue them. So it's kind of an interesting story. But these are highly collectible. There's the gray one, which I have one, and the gray one. I meant to bring a copy of the green one along tonight and forgot it. We walked out of the house and forgot it. But there's a number of grays. It says 400 there. The pink background is this, where it's white here. This is actually a gray one. The pink background is around the back, and then the green background is the same thing around the back. They made 3 varieties of it. The green one is going for, I think the last I saw was about $7,500, $2,000, $10,000.
About the water damage.
Huh?
About the water damage.
Oh, yeah.
That's interesting.
The reason a lot of these, even though a lot survived, if you look down here at the bottom on this one, you can see water stainage. They were stored in the basement of the BEP, and they had a flood. And a lot of these shields got damaged. So if you're going out to buy a shield, look for that water damage at the bottom, because you don't want one with water damage if you can avoid it. The water damage would sell for less if they're obvious. But a lot of these shields were in fact damaged by being in the basement of the BEP when they had a flood.
Question,
Yeah,
what's the size of the shield?
that shield, it's about that wide, about that high. Okay, I meant to bring one. As I said, I had one.
If you want to see one, George has one in the store.
Yeah. Does he? Do you have a gray one or a green one?
I know you said the green one was around 8,000.
Yeah, they're selling from 7,500 to 10,000. Unfortunately. 4th issue, from 1869 to 1875. Look at the size of this issue, $176 million. And think about that. I mean, that's even a lot of money today. But if you think about that back in the 1860s, $176 million is a lot of money. So there was a lot of this floating around. All right, there's 6 notes in this series. There's one of each, 10, 15, 25, and 3 50s. There's only 15 varieties, so the number of varieties has been reduced considerably. One signature combination covers the whole series. The bronze and surcharges were all dropped, but there was a treasury seal added, and that's back when the BEP was just getting really underway, and they added a treasury seal. They continued to experiment with paper types, and I mentioned Ivy Mills. Ivy Mills was one of those mills that was providing paper for this, and I'll show you some in a minute. But Ivy Mills was one of the paper suppliers for the fractional notes. These were redeemable really for U.S. notes only. They stopped for stamps in this issue. I think Pam mentioned almost all fractionals were printed by two paper printing companies. They did that again to prevent counterfeiting. So nobody had both plates. One banknote company had plate A, the other banknote company had the back or the reverse. And they did that to, again, as I said, they slow down counterfeiting if they didn't prevent it. 10-cent, 4th issue, pretty note. I like this note with Liberty on the note. Simple note. Lots of paper and fiber types, but no real varieties. There's a 15-cent note with Columbia on it. Again, you'll notice there's no portraits. They went to totally vignettes because of the one back, two fronts. Here's your Ivy Mills. I don't know if you can see that in this picture back there. Can you notice? Can you see the blue?
Yeah, yeah.
And you notice this side's white. Same note. This side's blue. This is Ivy Mills paper. Ivy Mills created this paper to prevent counterfeiting.
Tell them how they did it with those two pieces sandwich.
Yeah, well, yeah. You get into a long story with how you make paper, but basically it was two sides and they pressed them together to make the blue edge.
Where did all these counterfeiters come from?
They were rampant out there. Counterfeiting was rampant even before this, but
Oh, yeah.
Remember that the camera had been invented by now,
Yeah.
by this time. So a lot of them were doing it with cameras too.
and you know, as I said, 50-cent notes were a reasonable amount of money. I mean, that was like, you know, counterfeiting a $100 bill a day in terms of value. The 50-cent note was, I don't know, what was it worth back in the Civil War time? 10 times, 50, some number like that. So they weren't counterfeiting 50 cent as we know 50 cent. They were counterfeiting a larger denomination in our terms. The 25-cent note was the first time they went back to a portrait. And there is a variety of this note. You'll notice here this has a red seal. There is a variety of this note that has a brown seal. Again, one of those issues that keeps coming up in fractional currency collectors. Was it oxidation because of some ink they were using, an ink type they were using, or did they really print it in brown? Nobody's really been able to answer that question. Maybe one of these days.
I looked it up. It said it's only 50 cents in 1869 is only $8.71 today.
That's pretty good, actually. That's less than I would have thought, given. Then they got the fourth issue. Again, you'll notice they went back to the portrait with Lincoln. This is the only back on that note. And all of these notes, for the first time, have a watermark on them. And it's just 3 copies of US, US, US. But all this is on watermark paper. The first time they used true watermark paper. Stanton, he was Attorney General under Buchanan, Secretary of War under Lincoln. Pretty famous guy back then. One real variety. Again, the blue, you really can't see the blue fibers, but they're here. This blue fiber paper was used for this issue. You actually see it better on the top than you can on the bottom. Samuel Dexter, the Secretary of War. He became a Secretary of the Treasury later on. Again, you see the blue fiber visible. All this is Ivy Mills paper. And this was redeemable again for notes only, no stamps. It's been that way ever since the 3rd issue. The last issue, the 5th issue. 5th issue, Fractional Currency, February 74 to 76. Look how much less money was issued. This is about 1/3 of what was the previous issue because it was dying. I mean, coins were becoming back into circulation. Currency was starting to die out in terms of the need for paper currency to circulate. So this is one of the smallest issues other than the 1st issue. There's only 3 notes, 3 different basic notes in the 5th issue. Only 6 varieties total in this issue. The notes are all different and completely redesigned. Again, backs printed differently. You'll see one of the backs is printed by Philadelphia Company Carpenter. Meredith, you saw the note that Ken brought in, which is the Bob Hope note. I'll show you in a minute. This is Meredith, and I put one in the door prizes tonight, so there's a copy of this note in the door prizes tonight. This is called Grumpy Note. Okay? And everybody refers to it as Grumpy. If any of you are really interested, I have a whole presentation on these various notes as they're altered to make different characters. And some of them are pretty funny. But this is called Grumpy. The only real variety in this note, you're not going to be able to really see it from these slides, but this key right here and here, one is thicker and shorter, the other is thinner and longer. And those two varieties bring much different prices because the number of available ones are much less on the one variety than the other one. But those are two varieties. Again, as I said, that's what makes collecting this stuff kind of tricky. There they are. And you can see the long, thin key and the short, thick key in the two different
Can I also
varieties.
mention the spinner signature? They use so much ink, and the ink that they used then had a lot of acid in it. So lots of times you'll find holes in a signature.
Yeah, they burn through. This acid ink burns through. If you're going to collect fractional currency, be sure you look for the ones that haven't burnt through. Because if they've started to burn through, they're probably going to continue to burn through. And any kind of moisture creates a burn through hole on these things.
I've seen something similar to that on a 1914 $5 bill.
You might, yeah. Anywhere where they're using acid ink, you can get burn holes depending on how they're stored. But it's very common with spinner's signature only because that signature got so much ink in it. Walker, he was Secretary of the Treasury, pretty unknown guy. Not much about him. The same variety of long and short keys exists, and as I said, not a big issue. There's not a lot of these around because they were running down to the end of the series. There's your Bob Hope note. William Crawford. And this note, the way I mentioned, the back was printed by Carpenter here in Philadelphia. And again, you'll notice almost every one of these notes has two printers on it.
What would you say, Bob Hope?
Huh?
Bob Hope.
That's Bob Hope. Would you see him?
He has a big nose.
He was around in he was around in 1815. He's old. Yeah, he was around.
The whole fractional series ended in 1876. The war was over, 14 years, 24 basic designs. There are 130, and the last I saw was 137. There's always a different variety being discovered somewhere, or some little thing that's different, but 130 plus or minus varieties. There are dozens of experimental notes and specimens out there, and if everybody wants to ever get into more detail than I've gone through tonight, I can give you talks on specimens, fractionals, experimentals, and satiricals as well, by the way. But there are lots of them out there. Fractional currency had served its purpose. It solved the problem of the shortage of change, made doing business possible, revolutionized the printing of paper money, and created the BEP, and as Pam said, was had the first female employees in the government, in the U.S. government. There are lots of, I'm not sure what else I put up there. Oh yeah, 369 million total produced. Currency was never demonetized, by the way. It's the only U.S. currency, obsolete, that can still be redeemed at a bank. No, fractional currency was never demonetized. And so you can still walk into a bank and literally, I don't think you want to do it, but you can literally turn it in for money. In 1886, it was about 15 million still outstanding. There's well less than 1 million today outstanding. I just got I belong to the Treasury Historical Association down in Washington. And he just sent me the latest redemption numbers because they're still getting some of this in. They got about $150 worth in last year of this being redeemed. But he says he thinks we're into the $600,000 range of outstanding fractional currency. And a lot of that is junk. I mean, really bad condition stuff. So there's not much out there that's available for a collector that's looking for really nice things. Ways to collect. The basic way to start is there are 24 basic notes with the vignette or the denomination. Okay? And most people who get into collecting fractional currency will start there, and if you're not looking for all the varieties that are out there, or the experimentals or the specimens, you can pick up 24 sample notes, relatively inexpensive. You can obviously collect by the 5 issues, people do. You can collect by variety, but as I said, there's 130 plus specimens. Are all one-sided, they're uniface, and you can get specimens in wide and narrow margins. The narrow margins were made for those shields that I showed. The wide margins were made for collectors and sold in sets for collectors, and they're out there. Experimental notes, tons of them, tons and tons of them out there with the various paper types, inks, and designs on them. There are, like there are in coins or anything else, there are errors. I said there are sheets, blocks, counterfeits, and you know, you can, like you do in coins, you can go any direction you want to go and pick an area that's interesting to you, start to collect. But the basic way most people start to collect fractions is just trying to put together a 24 note set. Primary organization for this, it's the Fractional Currency Collectors Board, of which I'm treasurer. But it's a group that, I guess we have 150 members now, something like that, in the club. It publishes a newsletter every quarter, a very detailed newsletter every quarter. If people are actually interested in fractional currency, it's the Bible. It's very cheap to join. It's $30 to join, and for that $30 you get 2 Freeburg catalogs. You get a discount coupon for Denley's, and I think now we're actually, it's either you get this is the common book for fractionals. It's by Rob Kravitz, and it lists just about everything you see up here today. In here, it's the most basic book on fractionals out there, and I think that is included in the $30. So the
And then
$30,
after that, it's less.
But yeah, and you can buy it through the club for, I think it's $10.
I'm just saying, after the second year, you remember, it's less.
Oh yeah, it's $30 for the first year, and then it's 15, is it? I should think I know, I'm treasurer. Anyhow, you can join, and it's pretty cheap to join, and you get more than your money's worth out of education if it's really an interesting. Yeah, that's it.
Dave, you said 3 cents was the lowest,
3 cents was the lowest.
so if I went in and bought something for a penny, I give you the 3-cent fractional, and I'd probably get stamps back.
Yeah, you get stamps.
Do you know Peter Robin at our show? A bunch of years ago, like 20 years ago, Peter took some old fractional pieces to the bank, one of the banks in Narberth.
Narberth.
And he had them write a letter saying he exchanged these for 3 cents, 5 cents, whatever. And we have one of those sets, and I didn't even know Peter then, but it's, you know, it's a letter from.
I had the letter from the
postman.
post office and a letter from the bank.
Yeah.
I had the original.
Dave?
Yeah, Jim.
I have this vague memory of a story I heard a long time ago about being able to go to your local bank back in the 1920s or 30s.
Right.
And they had these things. You could go
Yeah.
and get them at the bank.
Oh, you could. You could, because as I said, they never demonetized this. And so you could go into the bank, and if they had it, they could sell it to you. They have to sell it to you for face value,
Yeah.
but they could sell it to you. And you can go in today and take a 50-cent note into the bank, and they literally have to redeem it for 50 cents. It's the only obsolete currency that has that.
The South would have had the same problem, so did they have the
There is a
same-
fractional Southern currency, yes, there is. It's nowhere near as extensive as this. But yes, there are fractional notes in the Confederate, absolutely. Yes, sir.
Are there any, you mentioned the surcharges for the second issue, are there any like studies on all the surcharge combinations?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is that in the book?
It's not in that book, but it's in Freeburg's book.
Okay.
It's in the book that we have at Freeburg. By the way, I mean, fortunately or unfortunately, I guess, the only place, well, you can buy that book on the market. I mean, Denley has it, and a couple other places have it. I think you can buy it on Amazon. It's $25 or $35, but the only place that you can get the Freeburg books is through the Fractional Currency Club. We have exclusive right to it. And we have it. Yeah.
How and why did you become interested, this is both you and Ken, in fractional currency?
That's a good question. I don't know what started me originally. What?
I collected it.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I don't know what really triggered us to get into fractionals.
Well, I saw them and I
as
thought they were
a thing. I
fascinating.
mean, she
I
picked
looked
up
at
a
the
couple at a
history.
coin show one time.
Did the history, thought it was wonderful. I wanted to get more, so he started buying them for me, and he got into it and took off.
I think the thing that attracted us most is the fact that there is just so much interesting history around the whole period, the Civil War period. And if you're really into the government BEP or this kind of things, it all started here. All of our currency production and printing and BEP and a lot of the structure of the government was created in this period.
I'm sure everyone else in the room besides me knows what BEP
Oh, Bureau of Engraving and Printing. Yeah, it's the producer of all of our money. One of the things I will try to do, and I make no promises here because I don't know that I can do it again. One of the things I'd like to do again before my contact is no longer available is get a group to go to the BEP again and down to the Smithsonian. Because I'll tell you, if you're a currency collector, getting into the Smithsonian vaults is the most amazing thing you can do. They bring out stuff that you would not believe and lay it right in front of you, and the worst part about it is you can handle it.
Well, I
And
don't
I'm
think you can do that
surprised.
anymore.
Ah, yes, you can. If you're in the Smithsonian, you can. But I'm surprised. I mean, they pass it around the table. It's in envelopes. I mean, it's in, holders. But still, I mean, that sample that Spinner made of the Postage Currency, the first one,
With the letter that he sent to
with
his
the letter,
friend.
I had it in my hands. I mean, today, if that were available in the market, it would probably go for 100,000 plus, easy, easy. And it's just, Lord knows what's in the Smithsonian that we don't know about.
Yeah,
Huh? Because their vaults are enormous.
yeah.
And one of my biggest disappointments, quite frankly, is that they do not display much of it. They really don't do a very good job of displaying currency or numismatics, for that matter, at the Smithsonian.
I went there when I was a kid as a school trip, and I was probably in 6th grade. So that's probably, I guess, 1966. And that I was late for the bus. They found me down in the coins looking at it. There were so many coins displayed. I looked at it, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't even imagine, you know. And then I went back and I was really disappointed because just a few that were there.
Yeah.
They had complete collections of every single thing you could imagine. I couldn't even take it all in. Like I said, they came looking for me. That's where I was. I would have still probably been there.
If anybody wants any information on the Fractional Currency Board, I have some right here. You're welcome to take with you.
Okay, let's thank Dave and Pam for